we're going to talk about the main lobes of your brain. And this should be super easy. Why should this be super easy? Well, because you've learned the parts of your skull, so this should be really easy. So in the front part is known as the frontal lobe. On the top of your head, this is the parietal lobe. In the back of your head, where you see is the occipital lobe. Over to the side is the temporal or temporal lobe. And there's the cerebellum again, and then we have the brain stem. You can see the pons right there. So those are the main lobes. So on your diagram where it says lobe, that's where you would label those lobes. Okay, and so again, the frontal lobe is in the front, the occipital lobe is in the back. Cerebellum is always in the back area. So you don't want to get any sort of damage on the cerebellum because you have some vital parts in your brainstem, cerebellum area. This one's coordination, but brainstem damage could lead to death. Okay, so this is the model that we have in class. So you can see there's that cerebellum there. And so in class, we would be looking at these two this thing right here that divides it in half. And I'm sorry, it's a 2D model and it doesn't show it well. I'm going to holds up and she goes through this model so you can see it a little bit better. But this that goes down the center of your head this way, where you get a front and a back. So as you go to the front, this is the frontal lobe, and as you go to the back, you're going to get the parietal lobe, and then back here you're going to get the occipital lobe. This is the divider here, and so this is called the central sulcus, and I'll show you that in a moment. Central sulcus, because sulci is where it's going in the valley. This is an important one because this is where your sensory and your motor communicate with one another. So you've got a sensory and a motor connection going on here. This one is the motor and this one's the sensory, and there's communication in the brain there. So there's that central sulcus. Sulcus because we're talking about the singular one, it's not sulci. Remember when it valleys down, central sulcus. And then everything, even the brown here, is the frontal lobe. That is where most of our, what makes us different from a lot of other organisms, our intelligence comes from our frontal lobe. It's where our thoughts and our reasoning goes in our frontal lobe. And I used to teach high school students, and I have to remember the high school students, their frontal lobes aren't quite fully developed. A lot of times people won't fully develop their frontal lobe until 25, and actually they've found for some people it's even longer, even into the 30s and 40s. So this is that reasoning. This is why high school students will sometimes do weird things. They'll jump over cars. You're like, why do they do that? And they're like, they don't know. They don't understand why they did that. Alright, so over here on the side is that temporal lobe. So again, towards the front, frontal, parietal, back here is occipital. There's that cerebellum. You can always find that there. So there's that cerebellum. PowerPoint's pretty good, so I think you can kind of figure out with the PowerPoint. So there's the back. This is where vision takes place, and so that is the occipital lobe. So if you get hit in the back of your head, they say you see stars. So that is where vision's taking place. You don't have to know this, but I thought this was kind of a good little thing. What your brain doesn't stay in one part. You send signals all throughout your brain. So, but this is where when people are speaking and when they're smelling, when they're tasting, this is where it would highlight most intense on like an MRI or etc. So we do know that getting hit in the back of the head can affect vision, etc. So I just wanted to show you, there's that central sulci again. There's that frontal lobe. There's the parietal lobe. This is the occipital lobe. That is that cerebellum. There, look at their heart rate and breathing. That's what I was saying. You don't really want to get damage to your brainstem there. So I'm not going to ask you about this, but I do believe in probably your lecture classes you do need to know some of that. You'll learn some different areas of your speech, etc. All right, so we talked about the central sulci, which cuts the brain this direction. We're going to talk about this long one, and this is, it's bigger than a sulci, so because it goes all the way down, and the corpus callosum is what's connecting it. This is called the longitudinal fissure because it's going longitudinally and fissure. The corpus callosum, if we were to be dissecting, we would do that. We would take and we would cut right down in there, and we'd cut through the corpus callosum.